This happened a couple years ago during winter break. I was 17 at the time, and home alone for a few days while my parents were out of state. That night, I was watching TV in our sunroom, kind of like a second living room, with a couch, a coffee table, and a door that led out to the side driveway. All the blinds were closed, and I was bundled under a blanket, half watching some movie I can't even remember, when the motion-activated floodlight outside suddenly flicked on. We've got a sensor light near the driveway, so I paused the movie and lowered the volume. I didn't hear anything, but I got up and peeked through the blinds. Nothing. The driveway was empty. Figured it was probably a raccoon or a stray cat. Still, something felt off. I even put my shoes on and walked outside to check. I circled the driveway and the side of the house. Nothing. It was dead quiet. I went back inside, locked the door, and returned to the couch. Eventually, I started to relax again, but maybe 15 minutes later, something crashed outside. It sounded like a plastic bucket tipping over, and then the motion light came on again. This time, I froze. I didn't want to get up. The couch was the one spot in that room that wasn't visible from the outside, and I had this horrible image in my head of someone standing at the door, watching. I thought about turning the TV off, but the remote was on the coffee table, just out of reach. I stayed still. That's when I saw it. Through the closed blinds, I noticed a shape, a silhouette, perfectly human, standing just on the other side of the window, arms slightly out as if frozen mid-step. My chest tightened. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was like my body refused to function. I slowly rose from the couch and backed away toward the hallway door. But then the figure knocked. Hard, aggressive, rapid pounding on the glass. I panicked and yelled, something about calling the cops. My voice came out shaky, but it was all I could do. The knocking stopped for a second. Then I saw movement. She stepped into view. It was an older woman, maybe in her 60s, with wild, tangled hair and a filthy coat. Her eyes looked empty. For a second, I felt a weird sense of relief, like maybe she was just confused. That thought vanished when she started banging both hands on the glass, screaming things I couldn't even understand. I slammed the door to the sunroom, ran into the bathroom, and locked myself in. Then I dialed 911. I told the operator there was a woman trying to break in. She told me to stay on the line and lock myself somewhere safe, and to find something to defend myself with. That's when I heard glass shatter, not far from the bathroom. I held my breath and listened. Nothing, no footsteps, no talking, just silence. After about a minute, I cracked the bathroom door open and looked down the hall toward the living room, and there she was. Standing in front of the broken window, inside, just standing there, not moving, staring into the dark room like she was trying to remember why she came in. When she saw me peeking from the hallway, she bolted. I slammed the door shut again just as she got close and started pounding on it, muttering things under her breath. I backed into the corner of the bathroom, shaking, begging her to leave. Then, finally, I heard a loud bang at the front door. I rushed to the bathroom window and screamed for help. 2 police officers appeared seconds later. I begged them to go around back through the broken window. I heard one of them yell, "Step away from the door," followed by a scuffle. When it was finally safe, I came out. They had her in cuffs. The woman looked at me as they walked her out, and her eyes were just gone, like something wasn't right behind them. I couldn't hold eye contact. Apparently, she lived just a few houses down. A relative, maybe her daughter or sister, was supposed to be caring for her, but neighbors rarely saw either of them. My parents pressed charges against the caretaker saying she'd been negligent. But the case didn't go anywhere. What matters is she was taken somewhere, a facility or institution, and we never saw her again. But I'll never forget that outline through the blinds and the way it just stood there, perfectly still, watching. I have a small house tucked away in a quiet, rural part of upstate New York. It sits on a wide, open lot surrounded by woods, with only a few neighbors nearby. One of them lives behind a tall fence that separates our properties. I'd never spoken to him. The other lives further down the road, and I only really knew him because we both ski at the same mountain resort. I came up this past January for a long weekend of skiing. The place had been empty for months. First thing I did was turn on the water, heat, and check all the pipes, the usual routine. As I was unlocking the front door, I heard a kid laughing somewhere near the neighbor's house. It caught me off guard. I'd never seen or heard any kids in the area before. That first night, I passed out hard after the long drive from Connecticut. The next morning, after breakfast, I geared up to hit the slopes. But when I stepped outside, I noticed something strange. A big red ball sitting in the snow on my front lawn. It wasn't there the day before. I figured it had to belong to the neighbor with the kids, so I just tossed it over the fence and headed to the ski lodge. When I got back that evening, the sun had already set, and the red ball was back. Same exact spot. Now it was a little weird, but I didn't overthink it. I threw it over the fence again and went to bed. But around 2 or 3 in the morning, I was jolted awake by laughter. A kid's laughter. I got out of bed and looked out the window, but the yard was empty. At least, I thought it was. Then I spotted it. The red ball, right back in the middle of the snow. This time, I went outside. Just a robe and slippers, freezing, but I had to see it up close. Sure enough, same ball, same spot. No tracks in the snow, nothing, just the ball. Instead of tossing it again, I brought it inside and left it on the floor by the fireplace. The next morning, still unsettled, I decided to go introduce myself to the neighbor. The guy, who I thought had kids. Turned out, he was an elderly man, probably in his 70s, lived alone. I asked if he had any family visiting. He gave me a weird look and said, "No, there haven't been kids around here for a long time." That gave me chills. I didn't press further. I just thanked him, went back to my house and headed out for another day of skiing. That night, after dinner, I came home completely wiped out. I dropped my gear on the couch and collapsed into bed, but once again, I was woken up by the same laughter. I jumped out of bed, ran to the window, and there it was, the red ball, back in the snow. I ran to the living room to check, and it was gone. I know I left it inside. I saw it before I left for the mountain. That's when I felt it. I wasn't alone in the house. I turned on every light, packed my gear as fast as I could, and made sure every window and door was locked. Nothing was broken, no signs of entry. I went back to my room, turned off only those lights and looked out the window. That's when I saw him. A child. Standing motionless in the snow, far behind the red ball, facing my window. He didn't move. I dropped below the window frame and pulled the blinds down. Then I shut every blind in the house. I didn't sleep for an hour, but eventually exhaustion took over. I passed out with all the lights still on. The next morning, I skipped breakfast, threw everything in the car, and got the hell out of there. I didn't even bother grabbing the ball. It was still sitting on my lawn when I pulled out of the driveway. To this day, I have no idea how that ball ended up back outside. The house was locked, no signs of a break-in, but I know what I saw. That kid standing in the snow. Silent. Still. watching. The laughter still echoes in my head sometimes. And that red ball? I never want to see it again. A while back, my roommate and I started noticing some strange things about our new neighbor. We'd never seen him move in, no moving truck, no boxes, no people. Just a car that suddenly appeared in the driveway one day. For days, we didn't even know who or what lived there. On the third day, we finally walked over to introduce ourselves. His car was parked out front, but no one answered the door. As we turned to leave, my roommate quietly told me to look at the front window. Someone was staring at us. A man, pulling down a sliver of the blinds, just enough to peek through, not blinking, just watching us. We kept walking like we didn't notice, but we both agreed this guy was off. That night, around 1 a.m., I started hearing noises outside. We live in a warm climate, so the windows stay open most of the year. From my second-story window, I could see into the neighbor's backyard. He was out there, big guy. Hoodie pulled up, even though it was in the 70s. He was sawing a huge plank of wood in the dark. It made no sense. I knocked on my roommate's door. He was already awake, too. Neither of us could sleep with all that noise. We decided to go over and politely ask him to stop. Since he was outside, we knocked on the side gate. The moment we did, the sawing stopped. But no one answered. We stood there for a minute, expecting something, anything, but there was just silence. At least the noise had stopped. We went back to bed. A few nights later, it escalated. I woke up to screaming, not shouting, full-on, panicked screaming. It was coming from the neighbor's house. I ran to the window and looked out. The man was in his backyard again, dragging something across the grass. I couldn't see what it was. But then he paused and looked up. Right at me. I ducked down and sprinted to my roommate's room. He was already calling 911. That's when we heard a loud bang downstairs. Our back door. We looked at each other in disbelief, and then panic set in. My roommate yelled into the phone, "He's in our house." While he stayed on the line, I crept toward the stairs. The floorboards below were creaking. I rushed back and shut the door to his room. There was no lock, so we braced our bodies against it. Then came the footsteps, heavy and fast, charging up the stairs. The bathroom door flung open, then footsteps pounded toward us. We pressed harder as the door shook from the force of someone slamming into it, over and over again. Then we heard something, a thud. He was hitting it with some kind of object, a bat or maybe a hammer, something heavy. We held the door shut with everything we had. Eventually, the banging stopped. We heard footsteps retreating down the stairs, and then silence. We waited, terrified, until finally, someone shouted from downstairs, "Police!" We breathed a sigh of relief and opened the door. But when we got downstairs, there were no cops. That's when I noticed something. Someone was crouched behind the dining room table. I whispered for my roommate to run, and we bolted back upstairs as the man lunged out from behind the table and chased after us. We locked ourselves in the bathroom this time. It was the only door with a working lock. The banging resumed almost immediately. Then, a second voice from downstairs. "Police! Drop the weapon!" The banging stopped. We opened the door crack and screamed, "Up here! He's up here!" 2 officers charged up the stairs. We heard a knife hit the floor. They took him down in seconds, cuffed him, and brought him outside. We told them what we heard earlier, the screams, the dragging. One of the officers stayed with us while the others entered the neighbor's house with their weapons drawn. More units pulled up out front. And then they brought out a woman, crying, hysterical, barely able to walk. She had been locked in his basement, banging on the door and screaming for help, but that wasn't the worst of it. A large bag was found near the back entrance. Inside was a body. We never found out who the victim was, or who the woman was. But it didn't matter. He was gone. And we were lucky to be alive. The house went back up for rent a few weeks later. We're just hoping the next person who moves in isn't another monster.